I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Board of Leavenworth County Commissioners. I'd like to invite everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start with a moment of silence. Roll call, start with Commissioner Culberson.
Here.
Commissioner Collins.
Here.
Commissioner Smith is here, and Commissioner Shimke.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens. All commissioners are present. I'd like to open up the portion of public comment. Anyone from the public wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name.
Good morning. Lest you, I'm Nancy Carpenter. Don't want you to forget about the Lenape Sand Quarry, so I thought I'd come and talk to you for a couple minutes. I live down in southeastern Leavenworth County. Leavenworth County citizens have been regularly expressing concerns about the potential for water well contamination with Kaw Valley's proposed sand quarry. At the July 10th Planning Commission meeting, Patty Shirley presented information about the water table, shared Kansas Geological Survey maps, and discussed groundwater contamination. The response from the Kaw Valley lawyer was that the planning staff had addressed all concerns and there would be quarterly reports and inspections. From what I've read in the staff documents, concerns were addressed by saying that proper state and federal permits had been obtained. When a commissioner asked about water, everything was fine because the proposed pit depth would not be as deep as DeSoto's wells. Private wells used by Leavenworth County citizens didn't seem to matter. I also found it curious that a requirement for water testing was not even part of the July 10th SUP staff recommendations. On July 31st, Ralph Wiggins stood before you and expressed his concerns about the water supply of those living near the proposed site, all of whom have private wells. On August 28th, Mark Tinberg stood before you and told you of the private wells in the area, the aquifer that feeds those wells, and how no one could guarantee the safety of the citizens' water supply. To date, I've seen no indication that the county is serious about protecting the water quality of Leavenworth County citizens who would be impacted by this proposed project. In reviewing other pit projects, I found that Douglas County required an applicant to provide a pre-dredging report that specifically studied the impact the dredging would have on the water supply. Might it be prudent for Leavenworth County to do the same given the concerns raised by the citizens? In case you're interested, I have copies of that pre-dredging report request, if you're interested in reviewing them. And then on another note, I'm wondering, it's been 3 weeks since Kaw Valley said that it would have a new traffic study. They projected it would be ready in 2 weeks, and it's been 3 weeks. I wonder if you could comment on the status of that. And I've also requested a copy of the scope document that we discussed at your last Board of County Commissioner meeting that Olson produced about the traffic study. I've requested that document and have yet to get it. So,
What was the date on this dredging?
The front of it says, I think
Was
it's
it
March 13th.
like a decade
so
ago,
like
or was
2013.
it-
No, it's like 2013.
2013.
It's the Eudora pit that's right across the river from,
So that was the,
it's the penny sand pit that came off the river and now is on the land.
Is there, can I ask our planning and zoning, is there a reason we didn't require that dredging report?
If I could comment on that, Commissioner. One, this item is not on the agenda today, and therefore staff's not prepared to speak on it. It will be on the agenda once it comes back to you for consideration, and there will be ample time for public comment and discussion. I would discourage open discussion on the subject until that time, because it's not fair for the applicant, it's not fair for the other citizens who are interested, and it's likely to have to be repeated during that meeting.
Okay, well, could I have like a letter or something in writing why we didn't require that?
If you'd like to stop by, we can discuss that further.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Morning, Commissioners. Joe Herrick Survey, 105 North Fifth Street. Just a couple follow-ups and seeing a couple people in the audience reminded me of this. Have one client that's wanting the track split and the additional right-of-way is being requested. We requested that not to happen. It actually happens to be on a road that was hard surfaced, paved in place last year. Nobody gave right-of-way, and now everyone's split his property and they're asking for right-of-way. Just wondering where, we had talked about maybe a work session and seeing where that work session stands, because it becomes kind of a timing issue now. He can't split his property or sell it if he doesn't want to donate the right-of-way or donate the right-of-way and have it taken and go from there. The other one is another update. We had talked before about final plats coming before the board quicker than 3 weeks. And that hasn't happened yet. And when you get to this time of the season and building permits and weather coming, getting the foundation in a week can make a difference, whether it happens this year or they build a new house next year. Just if we can get an update on that, I'd appreciate it. Don't expect one right now, but
Okay,
I appreciate it.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Sarah Williams, 12725 166th Street. And I guess I would love to just know why one applicant seems to have more respect and sway than thousands of residents who oppose the sand pit.
I hope that's not the case.
Well, it feels like the case. I'm just curious.
I think we're trying to be objective and fair. I think, I'm very sure that everybody's going to carefully consider all of the,
Okay. And then could someone clarify for me the CORA Act as far as the releasing of the open records? I read quickly that it's 3 days turnover, 3 weekdays. Is that?
I don't think there's a
Timeframe?
specific time, but
Upon receipt of a request, there needs to be a response with that request within 3 business days. We've received numerous requests from Ms. Carpenter, and we're working with her to get those. There are 2 documents Ms. Carpenter has recently requested. One is the Olson study she referenced. The other is a letter that the county received from the Basehor-Linwood School District. Those documents, I believe, were requested either Friday or last Wednesday. They're being prepared and will be sent to Ms. Carpenter.
But 3 business days is typical.
3 business days for a response.
Not to
Very
issue the
often,
document.
records require more time than that to compile and
Okay, what's a
review.
reasonable time then, would you think?
It
For a-
depends on
for a
what's-
school- The school board letter, for example.
My intention was to provide that to her before the end of business today.
and I think that's been publicly, I mean, that's a publicly.
Because you
released document.
posted it. You posted that.
Yeah, and it has already been posted.
So, but it's, just to clarify, you have 3 days to send like an email response saying,
We've
we
received
will research this.
And-
That doesn't mean you're going to get the document in 3 days.
Not necessarily. We try to get it as soon as possible. If we can get it before 3 days, we try to. We've received quite a volume of requests regarding this application, and it's taking your staff time to go through them and respond.
So, I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but I will say, you know, what the public thinks about the sand pit and what's lawful underneath the law, I mean, could be 2 different things. And we have to be very careful that we don't make a decision based on what the public wants and it be unlawful, and then they would go to district court and they would obtain their, whatever the decision from the court would be. So we have to follow strictly by the law.
I respect that.
And
I do.
that's where you're getting, we don't necessarily follow what the public opinion is.
Okay. I also happen to be part of a family who owns land and property in another state. And I know that we've had tenants request tenantship, if you will, and they don't fit the neighborhood. They'd be detrimental to the neighborhood, and they were, not considered. So I would just ask that you please honor the will, at least consider it when you're making your decision, that there are thousands of people in the southernmost part of the county who worry for their safety on the roads that were never, ever meant for commercial traffic.
And I think we'll follow that golden standard of the court has established, and we'll look at that if that matches up. That's what we have to follow. If we don't follow that, then whatever decision we make would not be legal.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak? And we'll close public comment and move on to administrative business. Mr. Lofgren.
First, just remind everybody that we do have a work session this afternoon at 1:30, the outer loop discussion. And I believe there's a member from Mid-America Regional Council who will also be here to answer a few questions for us. And then we have the draft letter. I sent it out to you on the dust abatement notification to the folks who live along the roads that are going to be postponed till next year. I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of discuss a little bit to make sure that we address all of the items that the board would like for us to. I know there's been some feedback on it already, but I just wanted to have a chance for the board to.
Other than giving the public utilities phone numbers for them to hound.
And I understand that desire, but I
I
don't know
know.
if it accomplishes what we hope to accomplish, which is to get the utilities moved as quickly as possible. Sometimes when you push too hard, you get
Push back.
equal, the law of physics, an equal and opposite reaction. And when you're dealing with an entity that's larger than us by a considerable amount, sometimes that doesn't work.
That's why their phone lines are down the middle of our road in the first place.
Sometimes that doesn't work out for us. So if that is the desire, then that's what we will do, but I just.
No, I was just, no.
Is the number that's on there a public comment line number, or what is that number?
The number that's currently on there is the Public Works phone number.
Okay.
I'm sure Lauren will be getting an influx of calls on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, my feedback was only not to make the letter that much more lengthy, but any specifics or detail we can provide, I think, is helpful, rather than it look like just poor planning,
Right.
which is not the case. There has been considerable scope change and implications to it, and albeit, I think communicating that we're accountable and have every intention of accelerating these within our ability, making sure that they understand the utilities are the biggest challenge and why these are not being completed this year. And I'm not suggesting we give them the, whoever the primary contact might be or coordinator, their cell phone. But I don't think it hurts for people to know that so they can follow up. We tell people all the time to talk to their representatives. I would suggest, talking to their AT&T rep if need be.
And I did forward.
I know.
I did forward
Painful.
your comment about the more detail as to why to Lauren, and we will incorporate that in the letter as far as the scope change as the project went on.
So has the, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, just to be clear, our plan was to mail that to everyone everyone that is a landowner on those.
Yeah. There's 300 plus
12 plus miles.
Yeah, there's 300 plus parcels of registered landowners on parcels along those roads, and that's who the letters would be sent
Okay.
to.
Has the date began with the 120 days to move the lines? Is that a starting date already?
I've asked Mitch with Olson and Associates to set up a conference with me and Lauren and Mitch and the AT&T representative so we could all be in the same room and get some specifics. I believe that was going to be either this week or next week, depending upon their schedule. So I don't have that date yet, but
Okay. Well, I'd like the date so we can mark it on the calendar, so when
I'll ask
we're
for
having this conversation next year at this time, I want to be able to say we've passed our 120 days.
I will ask for it in writing if they'll provide it. Sometimes that can be a challenge when you're dealing with a large utility company as well.
And how is this going to affect the additional projects we were going to add next year?
We've been having some discussion on that, actually. I've talked to the county councilor and Lauren, and a couple of the vendors as well. And we believe we can still get those done next year, and we're working on the utilities. As soon as we get the plans done, we'll start working on the utility locates and relocates on those as well. We're going to try our best to get them all done next year. That's what I would tell you. One of the things that I might be bringing to the board here after I can get the county councilor sign off on it, and I can also finalize some numbers with Lauren, is that the potential to just do a change order to an existing agreement to add those to one of the contractors that we've already bid out if they'll lock in the price from this year. And I'm a firm believer that that would give us the best rate. Even if we rebid them, we're not going to get the same rate that we got back in May of this year. So if we can do that, that would help speed it along too, and that's one of the things we're looking into.
A lot of people would be really happy if we could keep those projects on schedule.
We're going to do everything we can.
We done blew the schedule.
Yeah.
Well,
Obviously,
as
this
close to
year's
schedule as possible.
off, but
And as schedules get created, both for what we can handle as staff versus what we will be contracting, I guess my question would be, great if we can expand the agreements we have in place, but we're adding more and more projects onto a single contractor. I realize they're going to be working with subs and everybody else. At what point in time do we have to look at potentially adding more contractors so you have additional capacity potentially?
well, one of the things that we've looked at doing is changing the contracts, obviously, we'll change the scope of the contract. The current contracts were a little more open-ended as far as you get done by the end of October or whatever.
Right, they had a lot of flexibility.
A lot of flexibility. We're
They're
going to
open, they just didn't end.
We're going to try to firm that portion of it up. And then, so there's a little more pressure on the contractor if they don't perform, if they can't get it done, not because of weather related, because that's a clause in every contract. But if it's just simply because they have overpromised, then there should be something, I don't want to call it a liquidated damages because that's challenging in and of itself, but there should be some type of, they should be held accountable.
I agree, because I think that, even before we knew the utility issue existed, one of the contractors had asked if they might, if I recall correctly.
That's correct.
That they overbooked and could they begin the process the following year, and that's kind
was
of,
right
that's
after the
shady.
bid was awarded.
Right, that's pretty shady. I mean.
I would
my
agree with that,
opinion.
and I think that, and I don't know what the real, if they overbooked or whatever, but one of the things that they came up with is that we had a really bad year, and while they weren't working on our project, it did delay some of the other projects they were on, which pushed off. And they were going to send a crew out to try to get it done if they could, but then the utility thing came up, so.
Well, but that's
but
kind
I
of like their
understand-
fortune,
I
or,
understand where you're
our
coming from.
misfortune became their fortune, and I just think that that's kind of like,
And that would not be the contractor that had the lowest overall bid. They were lowest on the group that they bid, but they were not the lowest overall on the projects we bid last year. So,
There could be a lot of bad scenarios here. Oil could shoot up.
well, but when that
Well, it
happens.
already has,
Well, it could shoot up a lot.
Yeah.
And
which is why it would be really good if we could lock in the prices.
yeah, I know that'll work too. They'll be in there for a change order.
Yeah, because that's one of the other things, is we don't know what the price of the oil for the
So
asphalt.
the 500,000 we supposedly saved by doing the concrete base.
But that was
Could
just
be
on,
ate up.
that was just on one group. The total savings was closer to 800 and some $1,000. So it was a pretty significant difference between the concrete stabilization and the
And-
6-inch overlay.
But also, yeah, as he said, it's 6 inches if we do the alternate versus the 4. So we're talking about increase in asphalt.
Right.
We're increasing that much more due to oil increase.
Right.
Lauren,
Had it been done this year though, we wouldn't have to worry about the increase.
And are we watching the trends? Are you
I
getting
am
the
not.
reports and watching them? Is anyone?
our new procurement person,
I would imagine someone probably is.
None of our current contracts are based on the index, so,
But they're giving you your prices based on the index, so
well, the prices now are locked in at the price they bid. There's nothing in that contract that allows for a change due
Okay,
to an
that's-
index. We've allowed changes based on the index if the delay has been on us. that's not the case in these instances, so. We would ask that they, again, the only way that we would extend a contract is if they agree to honor the price in that
Okay.
contract. No changes.
Lauren, I was just going to ask, and I'm assuming either later this year, or some of it's probably already underway, but I think it'd be really helpful to look at a 2020 schedule. And when I say schedule, it just has a list of, new projects, the maintenance schedule, not necessarily putting certain roads into certain months, but just literally getting our arms around the scope of what we're asking this group to complete in 2020, which contractors are assigned to which projects. I think that would be just really helpful. And if that's probably more of a work session item as it becomes available, so I'm not saying next week or necessarily.
That'd be a good December item,
Sure, I mean,
the beginning of the year.
they got more than enough on your plate currently. I just think that's something we need to try to strive to create.
And they are working on a CIP, which is exactly what you're referencing as far as identifying projects when they do that. And they are working on that. Lauren and Olson Associates and Lauren's staff are working on those things right now.
What about the insurance recovery for the damage on County Road 1? Where does that stand, or where are we at in that process?
I think we're waiting on the final sheriff's report to submit it to the person's insurance company.
Actually,
I'm not
we
sure if
have
that's-
received a final insurance report. Delani, our office manager, has spoken with Janet, the county clerk, and she has directed Delani to move forward with contacting our insurance via our department. So I believe she started moving forward with that yesterday.
Thank you.
Okay. Any updates on Eisenhower?
Not
Still working with the two water companies to get agreements put in place.
Okay. All right. Any other administrative business?
And I was just going to say, I mean, the problem typically there is they meet once a month.
Once a month.
So,
So it takes them several months just to get to the point to agree.
so is that usually like they get together, then they send us an email, and then we get a chance to review it, and then next month they'll send another email?
Commissioners, I've had communications with one of the two water departments, Rural Water District Number 8, and I've prepared an agreement which has been reviewed by staff and we forwarded on to them. Their next meeting, I believe, will be October 3rd, and I will attend that meeting. In the meantime, their legal counsel will have had that contract or proposed agreement probably certainly before the end of this week for time to review it. We are trying to move it forward.
That one will be, if the agreement is accepted by them and by the Board of County Commissioners, then that one will be fairly straightforward because we'll be handling it. That's what the agreement says, is that the county will do that project. Since we were going to pay for it anyways, we'll just put it in as part of our project. Our engineer designs it, our contractor bids it, puts it in. So it shouldn't impact our project at all. The Leavenworth Water one, I think we're still, we had a preliminary number, but I don't believe we've gotten any kind of a actual agreement from them saying this is what they need in order to move that line. I think we're still waiting on
Yeah, we're looking into some possible alternatives to reduce some of the relocation costs, but additionally, what it will take with the current design.
Okay.
Moving forward with that, but.
And we have,
Still-
I mean, Olson's engaged on
that. All
Right.
those.
all the projects of any scale, right?
And I know they met with the maintenance operator for 8,
Okay.
so.
How does that typically work, the interaction with Olson? Do you have conference calls, or how do you?
I speak with them on far more than a daily basis, quite regularly, a couple phone calls throughout the day. Mitch with Olson is also sitting office hours as he is our main point of contact. I see him in the office Tuesdays and Thursdays afternoon, which is when he and I are working towards getting the CIP together and things like that. Paul is their main roadway guy, so he's running point on most of these projects. And I have both meetings with all of our utilities and our designers, as well as phone calls with them on a very frequent basis. So it just depends on what the situation calls for.
Any other administrative business this time?
Well, I just thought I'd bring up that a group met yesterday regarding the United Way kickoff and participation by the county in the United Way. So department heads, put on your radar that we're going to have our kickoff on October 4th with the lunch, that will kind of go in shifts beginning at 11 and going through either 1 or 2 p.m., just to make sure we can get all of the employees in. We'll be grilling, so we'll have it as a...
Are you grilling?
I will be helping. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. No, yes, we've got it all kind of, we're kind of laying out, we're going to do like a tailgate.
What day?
theme.
is it?
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday. And so that we've got a lot of things that we have planned that are going to make it kind of a fun event. So the department heads will start getting information via the email system, and I encourage all of our commissioners to have it on their calendar to try to attend. And there are some things that we've been talking about to do to kind of make it more fun for the employees that do attend, so.
Any other administrative business? Then we'll move on to the consent agendas. Commissioners had a chance to look at everything on the consent agenda. Is there any questions or concerns or corrections?
I just had one on the check register. It was the Central Square Technologies. I couldn't remember the vendor that was selected to do even like the website project, and then that got me thinking, and maybe a question more for Larry, obviously, is just how that project is going. You know, it doesn't seem like there's been, I'm sure there has with his team, but when you think about agile development, you generally have a lot of check-ins and milestones to provide feedback along the way, so ultimately the final product is what you expect.
I just
not-
asked about that yesterday, so that's a good question too.
I didn't know if that was the group or not, or what that, I think it was 35 grand, it was on page 2.
As far as the new web design, I can tell you that it's budgeted for, and then so really the work can't start until the new budget kicks in.
Okay.
We're restricted, we can't even obligate those expenditures until the budget year is here. So entering into an agreement today for spending in 2020 is not allowed. We just can't do that. So that's where the process is. I do know that Larry is researching it. I'll ask him for an update.
Okay.
So I can get a little more detail on it. And then you had also mentioned, brought up a question about cybersecurity. And I do know he's interviewed at least one firm, and maybe doing a second firm here in the next few days, actually. So but I'll ask him for an update on those two things.
So along those same lines, because I know I've asked this question a few times as far as new hires that are budgeted for in 2020, can we not, I mean, how does that work as far as engaging and starting like the interview process? So whether you're talking about a procurement director or an HR director or some of these positions that likely wouldn't be filled until next year anyway, is there anything that stops us from recruiting and engaging knowing that the hire date would be after?
On those, no, because as long as the hire date isn't, we're not obligated to hire them. As long as we don't put out a conditional offer before the end of the year, I don't believe it would create a budget violation for us. The other ones, though, if we engage a business to do work for us, we've obligated those funds, and that's a budget violation.
Well, so
But I know what you're, I know
whether or not we
where
would be
you're going with that.
recruiting internally, or if we were to even, have another conversation around a recruiter, it's still contingent upon potential placement. And I'm not saying these
Yeah.
are positions that you'd need to use a recruiter, I'm just.
Positions are different. The
Yeah.
positions are not a problem. We can begin that process as long
Okay.
as we don't put any kind of an offer out before the end of the year. The contracts for services, we can start looking at firms and exploring opportunities, but we cannot engage them to do anything until after the first.
Got it, okay.
Any other questions on the consent agenda items? And I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Having none, voting?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Aye.
All right, motion carried. All right, are we ready for community corrections?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning, Megan.
I have a few items on the agenda today, so I'll just get started with the first one. The first one is the adult carryover reimbursement budget summary. Every year, we have clients that pay money to us for UA costs or the cost of DNA. And so this is a kind of, for lack of better terms, like a savings account. It's a budget that we don't have to use within the year. It's not a budgeted allotted amount that we receive from the state. So this is ultimately money that we receive from clients over the course of many years, many months. It also has to do with our contract with KVC and DCFS, where we do the UAs for court. When we receive the payment for those UAs, it goes into this account. So, but we are required to, again, plan a proposal of how we plan on using that money for the year. So some of the items that we have in there are for upgrading our vehicle from a 5-passenger vehicle to hopefully maybe an 8-passenger vehicle. That'll help us be able to transport offenders to treatment, transport offenders to local groups that we're having, or even job fairs, because we have been notified of a lot of job fairs that are happening locally in our community. We also are looking at possibly updating our desktops and our printers and our monitors. We've actually not had those updated probably in the last 7 years. So that's proposed in this budget as well this year, as well as increasing some of our expenses to pay for offender services, such as evaluations for substance abuse, mental health, and possibly sex offender evaluations, just because those are expenses. They are very expensive. Also, because we did have the reduction of the behavioral health grant, we're kind of taking on a little bit more of the expenses that would have normally been proposed in that behavioral health grant. So I guess the amount that we're planning for is $43,011.15.
Megan, on the, you said about transporting people to job fairs and stuff like that.
Yes.
Under your line items there, it says vocational education services or academic education services. State doesn't provide any money for that.
No, it would have to be through these grants and budgets.
And then, did you happen to see the article yesterday in the paper about Kansas has jobs but not enough people to fill them?
I did, actually.
I mean, it's, to me, like I said, if there's funding for like some vocational education or any job training or anything to get people employed, I think that would solve quite a few of your problems.
I do know that there are some programs through the Workforce Development Center, but they're mostly targeted to at-risk youth and not necessarily the adult population. There is I don't know if it's a workshop or a lecture session that's going to happen on October 2nd down at the Leavenworth Public Library regarding some employment for possibly over at the airport, because they have placed a need that there is jobs, we just need the people for them. So I plan on attending that meeting.
Sounds like it's a need all over the state.
And that thing is specifically for people that are more disadvantaged population. So as far as the agreement that was signed by the contractor for the KCI project, they made they obligated themselves to outreach in that manner, so.
Correct.
What's the date of that?
October 2nd at 6:30 PM. at the
Scary
public
what they're
library.
imposing.
6:30?
To get
Yes, sir.
tradespeople trained up in a matter of.
On-the-job
And I can send
Yeah, I'm
Mr.
thrilled with
Lawfrey
that.
the
They're-
flyer
It's
It's-
critical, right?
so that you guys can be made aware of it, so.
And then Friday, I think that Connections to Success is going to be graduating a group of people out of the Workforce Development Office. So that's another program that I think that it has been worthwhile for individuals who are leaving the corrections system.
Yes, we've been working with Connections for Success. We've had a lunch and learn with them, and then we've also offered our office to have screening sessions. We can't make it court ordered because it's not ordered by the judge,
Right.
but just being able to provide that resource to our offenders if in those struggles, or if they're wanting to better their ability for employment, and also education, as well as I know in Wyandotte County and in Jackson County, they offer a child support reduction if you complete the program. So again, we've kind of been trying to work with Connections to Success for that here with Leavenworth as well.
I've talked to that guy that he asked about if we do that here in Leavenworth County.
Mr. Wilson, Mayor Wilson?
No, I'll have to think of the guy's name. But anyways,
I know Mayor Wilson does work for Connections to Success. That's who we've been contacting for everything, so.
this guy was a volunteer.
Oh.
How many,
I couldn't answer that question.
how many adults are you currently servicing right now?
We provide services for an active 213 adult offenders. Now, obviously, those fluctuate because of arrests or running away, but we're responsible for that number.
That's the number right now.
We did get 7 individuals on Friday, so just from court.
Do you have an opinion on how many of them would benefit from a training program, a job training, or a vocational that you feel would be successful?
My opinion is that, much like everybody, you can always do something to better yourself. So even if they're employed and they would like to find a career, not necessarily a job that would better themselves, I think that should be an opportunity for everybody. So I think there would be a great benefit for it. Now, the motivation would be a little different.
Well, that's where you come in.
Yes.
I was asking you,
Yeah,
what % would be motivated to take advantage of such a program?
I would say roughly based on our population at this current moment, probably about 35%.
That's a pretty good number. Guess add that to
Now,
our
how long that
list.
motivation lasts, I don't know, but we
Add
can.
this to our list that we may want to talk to our representatives about. Because, I
But
mean,
Megan, we've also talked about, one of the challenges that we only have so many employers that would even take these cases. So oftentimes, we're sending them outside of the county, in which case travel becomes incredibly difficult, and then the cycle repeats.
Correct.
Is that fair?
That's fair to say. Fortunately, though, with the forum, I should say, that's going to be happening on October 2nd, they are offering transportation for people to get the rides from here or around here to the airport. So I'm really going to hope that that kind of starts the segue of how we can start getting some of these individuals employed. And again, not jobs, but careers, things that they are interested in so that they want to stay in it. So then they are motivated to stay in it.
all right.
On our last week's meeting, we kind of talked about some corrections issues, but of the 213 adult offenders, do you have an estimate or percentage you might guess that are also facing drug and alcohol issues?
I would say probably 95% of them. Of some level or another. Either a past history of it where they would still have to deal with the recovery, or a current problem that they're overcoming or trying to overcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Each one of these is going to have to be a separate motion, correct?
I don't know.
On these?
Yeah.
Like, because these are,
I would
this is
believe so.
stuff that's got to be turned into the state.
Right.
I guess on the first one, I guess we'll just entertain a motion to approve the 2020 adult carryover reimbursement. Authorize the chairman to sign it.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 adult carryover reimbursement budget summary.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Aye. Is there anything to explain on the next one?
No, it kind of follows the same suit.
Okay.
The only difference is that with, again, the juvenile carryover budget, we do the first judicial district, which is both Leavenworth and Atchison, which is why you have two different budget proposals for the carryover summary in front of you. We have to approve Leavenworth's and we have to approve Atchison's because we monitor and oversee Atchison's supervision,
Okay.
only on the juvenile side.
So it's just pretty much self-explanatory. Once again, no money for education or training.
I actually had a meeting with Atchison yesterday, and we are looking at possibly utilizing a little more of their health department that has services and funding available to actually engage more mental health services inside of the schools, their at-risk school, which is called Central. So we're working on that. That was just yesterday morning.
And
so.
for the juveniles, they do have a BOCC in Atchison, and then they have the Pioneer Center in Leavenworth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But
So if there was funding
There's
available.
not cost associated with the kids that are in school. Well,
No, the state pays
the
for
state
that.
pays for that, so.
And provides transportation.
So I'm just saying that as far as juvenile population, it's a little easier to get them into a
Right.
vocational program.
This one, the prior one, it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
But you gotta be in school.
How many clients are you
Sometimes that's
currently
a
serving in the juvenile area?
For our Leavenworth location, we're serving about 18, and for our Atchison location, we're serving about 13.
What's the capacity for, how many people can you have there? Most?
I mean, there's not really a max, it's however many the judge or courts order us, but there was a significant law change for the juvenile justice code where there are a significant reduction in juveniles that are being supervised across the state of Kansas. So I would say honestly, our caseload's probably about average across the state of Kansas.
Right.
We have 2 officers in Leavenworth, and Atchison actually only has 1 supervision officer. So for Leavenworth, we get to split that number in half. But for Atchison, she has all of those.
You don't have like to just one, there's not like a facility limitation because of the type of program that it is. It's more about how many cases could one individual take, in which case that would be your capacity, right? It's whatever your head count is.
Right, well, I mean, we don't really get to have a say. It's however many the judge orders to
Okay.
us. So we can't say, oh, no, we're at max capacity. Like,
have to figure it out.
we would have to just utilize different resources, again, potentially have to hire another part-time officer if our caseloads get to that level of supervision. And again, the juvenile code and supervision is much different than the adult code. These individuals are on with us from the start of ISP to when they go into the youth correctional facility, if they go into the youth correctional facility, and then when they're released from the youth correctional facility. So we have them for a large length of their term of supervision if they're placed on with supervision with us. So although 18 is a much lower number than the 200 on the adult side, we have them for longer. I mean, ideally, it would not be longer, but if they go to the youth correctional facility and have to do their term there, and then they're released and placed on conditional release, we are required to monitor them as well for whatever length of time the parole would be.
You say 30 in Atchison?
13.
13, I wrote the wrong number down.
So those numbers also do include the individuals that are at the youth correctional facility. Right now, Leavenworth has 5 in the youth correctional facility. They just got another one yesterday, so 6 that are in the youth correctional facility. So those still count as our numbers that we have to supervise. We still have to go to Atchison or to Topeka and see them in the youth correctional facility at least once a month to check on them and make sure everything's okay. But so they're not in our office every week like we would normally have regular supervision offenders be, so.
So who does that? You just have somebody from your staff drive over there and meet
Yeah,
them?
it's whoever the client is assigned to.
And then you have a meeting with their staff?
Yes, their caseworker out there, the counselors if there's any problems, sometimes the teachers if there's any problems within the teachers. So it's about a 45-minute to an hour conversation with each individual. You also have to go around what their school schedule is. So they have like 2 hours that they're in school, and then they take like an hour and a half break, and then they go back to school. So you have to coordinate with the visitations.
So like an IEP, like in the public schools, sort of the same type of thing?
They don't necessarily, like the IEPs are more on an individualized level, and they do those more through the case managers there. So this is just the regular school basic setup for the education system, because they don't have like a recess. Lunch is a little more structured because they have to do it back at their cell.
Yeah, I think I know I've had this conversation on the public works side, I don't know if we've had it, but like for a vehicle, so a larger one to help with transports. I don't know all of the different allocations you can have to these funds, but let's say you were going to lease a vehicle versus acquire one. Could that spread, that difference of $10,000 or $12,000 be reallocated to different line items in the grant application?
It could be, but I don't believe the state of Kansas nor the Department of Corrections allows us to lease vehicles. We would have to purchase and own them. And the max capacity that we can purchase a vehicle at is $18,200 per state contract. So if we were to get a larger vehicle, in our instance, we would divide the cost between the adult staff and the juvenile staff.
Makes perfect sense. Way to go, state.
Yep.
And again, the hope would be on the, again, I have gone and visited the youth correctional facility now a couple times. And there are a lot of parents that can't get there. So we were thinking about trying to maybe provide an option for the parents to go visit the children there, because sometimes there's no support while the kids are there. And being able to start working on return plans and release plans back to families in the community. But we have one individual whose mother can't get there because of a physical handicap, and Uber doesn't really offer that kind of stuff, and her family's kind of removed her from their lives because of the case that happened. So, like, the kids is in a standstill and the parents are in a standstill with that. So being able to have the larger vehicle to accommodate some of those things would be an incentive for the children, as well as the motivation for the parents to try to get back involved in how we need to have them be returned back to our community.
Which is kind of ironic, because the state does lease equipment.
Right.
You know, the mower tractors and other heavy equipment. Anyways, well, I'll entertain a motion then to approve the 2020 juvenile carryover from Leavenworth County.
Motion to approve the 2020 juvenile carryover reimbursement budget summary for Leavenworth County.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Having none, voting?
Aye.
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 Next one is for Atchison County. I mean, it's pretty, does commissioners have any questions of Megan on that one? I mean, it's the same format.
And the only difference is they are asking for an office staff. They actually do not have a secretary or an administrative assistant. So they're looking at somebody part-time to help run and manage their front office. And it would be part-time. I think she only allotted for like 1,400 hours with, again, benefits that are prorated for that.
Probably a full-time position, but anyways. So,
I think that's her goal. We'll start small.
baby steps.
I do know that she did in the past have a full-time staff, but, for that position, but due to some changes and some budget stuff, she did have to let that person go. This has been 3 or 4 years ago, so.
Right.
How many of her 13 are over in Topeka?
I believe 4,
4 out of 13.
last I remember.
Have any questions, more questions on the Atchison part? Then I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2020 juvenile carryover for Atchison County.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 juvenile carryover reimbursement budget summary for Atchison County.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting.
Aye.
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 That carried. All right, now we've got the
And here she goes again.
year-end report for adult community corrections.
Yes, the Department of Corrections for the Adult Division asks that we do quarterly reports just to document what, per our comp plan, what our goals were for the agency, and if we're accomplishing them, not accomplishing them, what struggles we have, and how we're overcoming some of those struggles. So this is ultimately the end of the year report that says that we have accomplished most of those goals. We are continuously still working on some of them, as you can see probably per my quarterly report and then my weekly updates that I provide. We are still working to make sure that these are in complete process and fully active in our agency. So this is just the end of the year report that says that we've accomplished our goals, and we did have some barriers that we had to overcome, but we did work on them every month, and we were successful in getting a lot of these things up and going and fully active at this point.
Any questions of Megan on this? Does this require all commissioners to sign, or just?
No, just the chairman. The format is
All right,
with
looks like
everybody.
there's a lot of lines.
to,
Yeah. And the what is it called?
Moral recognition therapy.
Therapy. How is that going?
It is going very well, actually. We have 2 active groups going, one male group and one female group. We have roughly about anywhere between 3 to 5 people engaged in that group. Obviously, with the number that we got on Friday, we will be increasing that number. But we've had a lot of good feedback. A lot of the offenders that are participating are really kind of peeling away the different layers of the onion and kind of really starting to look at themselves and some of their behaviors a lot differently. So, which is what we like to see, because then that allows us to start to, again, build that change and provide them with those suggestions and resources to be able to help them move past some of the barriers that they've had. So we've had quite a bit of success. We actually have a couple individuals that have really taken on a great role in the group, kind of almost like a mother figure, father figure, and keeping people accountable and held in place and calling people out when they're not doing what they need to do in groups. So it's kind of really interesting to see and watch. So it's been fun.
Well, whoever came up with it, I think it's a really good program.
Yeah, it's very intense.
I think it has a lot of potential for success.
I believe so as well. And then they've had years of success with it with the federal probation and parole. So hopefully we can start to get that a little bit more on the state side.
Megan, you mentioned one of the challenges is data collection. I'm just kind of curious, and that's a lot of times where, because of when it started and/or lack of resources, but I'm curious what the mechanism is, like how are you, what that data collection looks like, and then ultimately how it's going to be shared back to whether it's the state or the
So
county.
for the moral recognition therapy, we actually have a spreadsheet that we track all of our referrals, and also with those referrals, we track what that offender's LSIR score is, which is their risk need assessment at that time we did the referral. So then throughout the course of their progress or digression through the program, we can then, because every 6 months or a year we do a reassessment. So then we can also evaluate the scores if they're differently based on certain domains within the assessment. So the population that we target for MRT is usually higher score level and the domains of like emotional, personal, which is pretty much behavior, their attitudes and orientation, which again falls under the behavior part, as well as sometimes the employment world, because sometimes they're not employed because they're not motivated or don't have the right attitude. So those are the 3 areas that we target for referrals to be at a little bit higher score in those areas. So then the hopes would be by the end of the time they've completed, those are lower scores. And we collect that data within our office, but then also the state is requiring us to submit information about the cognitive behavior programs that we have within our agency. So if we had additional ones, we would document what data we're collecting from that as well.
And it seems like in the private sector specifically, they know that reimbursement is going to be tied to results, right? So the software solutions that they're using to track and communicate the progression or regression, to your point, is a pretty big deal. And again, I don't know how on the public side that's going to work necessarily with the state, but I know private side that is a focus and will continue to be from a reimbursement perspective, because if you're not showing the improvements or results that others are, the funding will be implicated.
And I do know on the adult side, that's going to be a very huge push this year, is a lot more of the comp plan is regarding the data of the agency. So, so that's why I've personally really tried to start keeping track of our officer success rate and our UAs, who's attending and who's not, and like what's the success of positive UAs versus negative UAs. So we've really started a lot of data collection within our agency, because unfortunately on the juvenile sector in the division, there isn't a data collecting source. So it's kind of all has to be internally. So we're kind of mirroring what we do on the adult side with the juvenile numbers as well, just so that we can start to see some of that data and start to be able to document if programs are successful or if outcomes are not being met because of different whatever barriers. So
Any more questions? We'll consider a motion for approve the 2019 end-of-year report of adult community corrections.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 2019 end-of-the-year report for adult community corrections.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 Do
No
you
more
wanna do your-
voting, but I've got my quarterly report.
No,
now.
that's right. So do you want to just go right on into the quarterly report?
I sure can. So,
All right, thank you.
again, we've talked a lot about what's kind of going on in my agency, but we have been having court for sure, every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We have had some court hearings on Mondays and Thursdays as well. So we're very much involved in the court world. We're in there pretty consistently. All of my staff have completed all of the enrollment stuff for the insurance. We also still have our monthly UA days, monthly field visit for both adult and juvenile. We still have our MRT groups, and we still have our monthly review meetings with Serenity, which is our substance abuse treatment program. We've had some anniversaries within my agency. We've had Mr. Skaggs has just celebrated 6 years with the county, and Miss Berry just celebrated 13 years with the county. We also have our intern, and he's learning quite a bit, and is actually really opening up his eyes a lot more to the juvenile world than what he's learned through school. Again, we just, signed and submitted all of the carryover budgets, the end of the year report. So those will all be submitted today. As far as our budget goes, as of September 4th, we had $702.65 remaining in the adult budget, which was about 84%. Again, our budget fiscal year starts July 1, so that's from July 1 until now. Our behavioral health budget is still remaining at $4,350. Our juvenile funds for the juvenile ISP, which is the probation, is $144,051, which is 98%. The case management portion, there is an error in the formula, but the number is correct. So although it says 102%, we're still sitting at $132,164.20. And then again, as part of our responsibilities under the juvenile budget, we also do the intake and assessment, which is monitored by the Juvenile Detention Center under the sheriff's budget. But there was some errors in personnel items, so unfortunately, we kind of had to take a little bit of a larger hit or first on in the our fiscal year. So they're sitting at about $35,362.55. And then we still are remaining at 100% on our Project Change grant, which is $116,020. The reason that's remaining at 100 at this point is they only submit their invoices quarterly, so we have not received the invoice yet for the services that have been provided. So we should be receiving an invoice by the end of this month, which will affect that budget. For caseload size, again, we're sitting at about 244 adult offenders that we're responsible for. And then for, again, the juvenile side, it's 29 that we're responsible for, but again, a large portion of those are considered, those in correctional facilities and or being supervised on the parole side. We continue to do our lunch and learns. In fact, we have one scheduled, I believe, this Thursday. I have to get confirmation on that, but we've had some with clinical associates. Again, the Connections for Success mentoring program out of the Youth Correctional Facility and Green Feather monitoring. We've attended a large round of training this year so far fiscally. We've also had some meetings with the county administrator, presentations in front of the board for signatures. Our advisory boards for the adult community advisory board is set for the 15th of October at 3 o'clock here in Leavenworth. And for the juvenile advisory board is set for the 16th of October at 2 o'clock here in Leavenworth. We continue to have our jail meetings quarterly. We have monthly parole meetings. We've been having quite a few project change meetings, just making sure everything's on board with the data collecting with that, because there was not data collected for that program as well. And then a lot of other events. We've had some MRT conference calls. We've toured the youth correctional facility. I toured the mental health facility at Strawberry Hill campus down in Kansas City, Kansas. We've had the Cornerstones to Care meeting, which will actually be the company that's taking over the KVC for Leavenworth. So they're supposed to be taking over October 1st. So we had a meet and greet with them down at the guidance center, or I'm sorry, at the community center. We have a director's meeting scheduled for next week in Topeka. And then again, just still a list of our goals, deadlines and progress that we've been having for our agency. We do have a sex offender training program set up for October 17th and 18th. One of those days is the adult supervision, and one of those days is the juvenile supervision. Again, we're still working on getting a lot of that data collected, and then again, translating that to be utilized to effectively supervise offenders as well as obtain more money through grants, because we can articulate the need for those programs through our grants. Again, we're still working on trying to see about a possibility of a specialized caseload. So we're doing a lot within our agency, and again, a large chunk of that is that data collection. So, any questions?
I guess, how closely are you working with the Alliance? Do you have much interaction with the Alliance against family violence?
We recommend or encourage offenders who have been victims of domestic violence to reach out to the Alliance. But as far as services provided to our offenders, we don't have a lot of engagement because normally we have the perpetrator. So
Right.
If the victim calls us, we encourage that kind of interaction and support. If the victim continues to have interaction with our perpetrator, we
So you get
contact.
referrals then?
Yes.
Okay,
I was gonna ask you-
Strong suggestions.
right.
A similar question on the guidance center front. So as people are transitioning from, these programs, what does that look like? What is the interaction or communication that exists today between your group and?
In the Guidance Center? Well, we have a lot of interaction with the Guidance Center because of the Project Change grant. So the grant was written to ultimately be a funnel for juvenile offenders to go straight from court and be engaged in services within the same day. So we have interactions with the Guidance Center pretty weekly. As far as on the adult side, we have specific funding for for clients that are certain level of clients or cases based on their charge that have to do services through the Guidance Center because they're certified. So we have a lot of interaction with them, usually on about a monthly basis, because usually that's when we do our client check-in. It's usually on a monthly basis, but on an administrative level, we've been having a lot of trainings there. I emailed Keith pretty consistently on some things. I've helped them. We're trying to find some new staff for the Project Change. We've been very involved with that process. So we have a lot of interaction, I believe.
How many of the total, the 244 and the 29, how many are male and how many are female?
I don't have those numbers. I
Is
can
it
count them real
disproportionately
quick.
male and-
Honestly, I would say it's about 50-50 on the adult population. And on the juvenile, I'd say about 50-50 on the juvenile. I count 8 relatively females, 9 females on the juvenile side. So about 50-50.
Any other questions of Megan on the quarterly report? Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
And did you
Thank-
sign those? Or?
I did.
Okay.
I want to thank Mr. Fields for coming today to hear this report. Thanks for all the work you do on that.
Good to hear this report.
It is.
I should have one more. Here. Is it that one?
Oh, yes, I signed it. I'm sorry. All right, thank
See
you.
you next month.
All righty. We ready for Mr. Weber?
Morning.
Morning, Bob.
First thing I have here is, we have some damage assessment, rebates for property taxes of homes. I separated out two, two because they were not for the tornado separately, so I thought they should be considered separately from the ones that are tornado. The first one is 18155, tax ID. It was destroyed by fire on June 20th, and it was 100% destroyed, provided an insurance estimate. So have an abatement amount of $5,079 on that one. And then the second one was destroyed by flood. We do not have any insurance or estimates. We are basing this recommendation, or I'm basing this recommendation, based on the fact that, water was up on the first floor for a considerable amount of time on this property. FEMA considers the house to be destroyed if water's level is at least 4 feet on the first floor, and it was. And we have a total value on the house of $10,490. It only takes $5,245 worth of damages for this house to reach that 50% criteria.
Okay.
So that is why we're recommending that one also. So those would need to be.
Okay, so do you need a separate motion for each tax ID, or can we lump
On
these two
these
tax
two.
IDs in together in one motion?
Separate motion for these tax IDs on these two here, and then the ones on the tornado we'll do all together.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on these? These are pretty self-explanatory. So I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve disaster relief tax abatement for tax ID 1-18155 in the amount of $5,079.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 I'll entertain a motion on the next one.
Motion to consider, put my glasses on. Motion to approve disaster relief abatement for tax ID 1-00085 in the amount of $965.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Voting?
Aye.
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 And the next one is consideration of this board order for properties that were destroyed or substantially destroyed by a tornado. There are 8 properties, I believe, listed on there that were destroyed or substantially destroyed. Again, the last property on that list, all the rest we had insurance estimates. We don't have any insurance estimates. They have no insurance. They cannot get any estimates from any contractors because they have no insurance. Nobody will give them estimates. We included it. We went in a physical inspection. Every house surrounding it was destroyed, completely destroyed. This house appears to have reached, it probably would have been tore down if they had insurance. The owner's son is doing the work to the property themselves. Lost garage attached in one end of the house. The other end was also sucked off the house and a significant amount of portion of the roof. And
I'm sure your staff is qualified to make this decision. I mean,
I just wanted to lay out why
Right.
we are
recommend.
no, we can do these all together, correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Just real quick, and I agree with Mr. Smith, but why would a contractor, regardless of insurance, not be able to estimate either repair or replace? Like, they, you know.
I don't think they feel that they're going to get the job, and so they won't give them
My
an
guess
estimate.
is, okay, so they're just not gonna waste their time, and clearly they can do it. They're just.
That's what the property owner has been telling us.
Well, you have to remember, it costs a contractor to give an
Right.
estimate, so if they
I
don't
know,
feel
but
like
they
they're
do
gonna
it
get,
and
yeah,
lose them all
I
day
know.
long.
That's
Yeah,
just-
they know they lose this one, then maybe. But like I said, I mean, his staff is trained for appraisals, what a property is and isn't. So I don't have any problem with it.
Well, it seems like at some point, though, why could we not, at the county level, have a contractor on our behalf go into
On-call,
estimate
we
so
could-
that, so
we
that we
could have an
could
on-call contract.
at least validate how to assess it, right?
Yes.
What's the
But
board
that would
order
be a
gonna
paid
be?
position. I mean, we'd get a bill.
Right, if it's on, yeah, right, okay.
But yes, we could do that. We have on-call contractors for other things. So, any more questions of Mr. Weber? I'll entertain a motion to approve these.
Motion to approve board order number 2019-5, an order of the Board of County Commissioners of the County of Leavenworth, Kansas, made pursuant to the authority granted to them under KSA 79-1613, making certain findings regarding the application for the abatement of property taxes on certain homesteads damaged by tornado. Do we need to list the tax IDs?
I don't think you need.
No.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on tax abatements of these 8 properties? None? Voting?
Aye.
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 And it takes all commissioners to sign this because it is a board order.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you.
Quarterly
report. All right.
Through the month of August, staff has inspected 4,264 parcels, 12,475 of those for building permits, 2,789 for our annual 6-year reinspection requirement. About approximately 2,400 parcels remain for the 6 years as of through August. We usually start on that in May, so we received 1,263 sales for 2019. This is through the first 8 months. This compares to, it's down a little bit from last year, up a little bit from the year before. So last year we did get more, but we're down a little bit from that last year on the number of sales. Excuse me. The average sale prices for homes, through the first 3 months is $230,000 compared to the 2018 at $213,000. So we're not really seeing it. And I've got below the number some market trends. I'm looking at sales that sold, properties that sold twice that haven't been changed, haven't been remodeled, those types of things in between the 2 sales, and what kind of indication they're giving us for annual trends. And you can see those for rural, for the whole county, it was 6.2%, rural is 8%, Leavenworth is 5%, Lansing 7%, Tonganoxie 6%, and Basel 4%. Those, a little bit of a small sample size, but just to kind of give you an idea, it doesn't look like sale prices are dropping any. They still seem to be increasing through this year to this point. Number of building permits. We had so far through this year was 105. 2019, those are down, for new homes, these are new homes, it's down from last year and the year before. Some of that's a little bit, and I broke those numbers down by city and unincorporated areas. That's a little misleading. There was a lot of permits, like in Leavenworth, taken out right at the end of last year, and now we've got a bunch of foundations going in that we don't have permits for yet, so those aren't included in there either. So, but it's just kind of give an update on where we're at right through that time. Item number 4 I have here, taxation of property on federal land. Recently questions have come up on taxation of property on Fort Leavenworth and the VA. So first of all, any property owned by the federal government is exempt no matter what the use. This differs from property owned by state, cities, counties. In those cases, it has to be used exclusively for exempt purposes. Property owned by the federal government is exempt due to ownership. Because the federal government says, by state statute, and because the federal government says we will not pay taxes to states and local governments. State law simply reflects federal law in that manner. So if the federal government owns it, they can rent it out. As long as they're maintaining ownership to a for-profit corporation to an individual, it's still not taxable. It's exempt by ownership.
So is there any instance where there's a building or a property, say, on the fort or otherwise, that isn't owned by the federal government?
I'm going to get into.
Oh, did I jump ahead? I'm sorry.
Okay. So, in 1875, and yes, we do, to answer that question, yes, there is some, but in 1875, the state legislature passed an act to cede jurisdiction to the United States over the territory of Fort Leavenworth Military Reservation. The state of Kansas ceded to the federal government the exclusive jurisdiction over Fort Leavenworth, only reserving the right to tax railroads, bridges, and other corporations. In 1981, the Court of Appeals, the county tried to put property owned by Armed Forces Insurance on Fort Leavenworth on the tax rolls. The Court of Appeals ruled the county did not have jurisdiction to tax private property owned by Armed Forces Insurance Association because the state of Kansas only has ceded that jurisdiction over the federal government. They only reserved the right to tax corporations, railroads, bridges, or other corporations. And they have to be strictly a corporation. And Armed Forces Insurance was not a corporation. It was an insurance association, is what the court found.
Bob, I thought Donna was trying to get Burger King too in that same case, and they were ruled not a corporation?
That was later, Commissioner.
Was later?
Yes.
But they were ruled not a corporation, is that why they got off?
That was a separate
Yeah,
board
say if
order,
it's an
was it not?
individual, it's probably an LLC, in which
LLC.
case.
I believe they did, and they were turned back by the Board of Tax Appeals,
Okay.
I think.
So it should be entities not owned by, you
Well,
shouldn't
but-
clarify the corporation. There's plenty of partnerships, LLCs.
A whole lot in Kansas.
But now
Which
the,
are not deemed to be corporations.
Right.
but even with the language
That's what I'm saying, the
now-
language here is poor, it needs to be amended.
Yeah, but even with this, with the language.
I'm going to 1981, could have been brought up, but that's right.
But even now, I'm just, my point is that at this point in time, with Michael's Housing, they open up renting of the property on Fort Leavenworth to civilian employees. So that's not military dependents or military personnel. That is individuals who, maybe the construction company that they work for is doing work on Fort Leavenworth, or maybe they work for the contractor for the Department of Defense or whatever, but They're
It's-
renting property and are open to rent property on the Ford.
Right,
I
the
think that's
challenge
why
is
they
you can
changed
be
it to
private
exclusive.
and you can be for-profit, but if you're not,
Corporation.
if you're not
If you're not a
registered as a
corporation,
corporation,
And
then
there's,
that's why I'm saying the language is poor.
Yes,
they're
So it
not a
needs to be changed.
corporation.
And I think they added primarily to exclusively.
right, but
And secondly, to
still.
that
I agree.
question, the legislature passed a law exempting, here, let me, any and all housing developments and related improvements located on United States Departments of Defense military installations in the state of Kansas, which are developed pursuant to the military housing privatization initiative. I skip a little bit there, and are any successor thereto, in which are provided exclusively or primarily for the use of military personnel of the United States and their family. They snuck that word or primarily
That's why I
in
said
there.
it's bold.
Doesn't require it to be used exclusively.
Well, what about the apartments on the VA?
VA, the departments on the VA, we don't have them being owned by anybody other than the federal government. They are being leased. I don't have, and I've checked down at the register of deeds, we've checked everywhere.
That's 99
That
year
they
lease.
are being leased from the federal government, but that they
Yeah.
are still owned.
Yeah,
That's
you
why
can't get any of it by leasing.
what I covered in number A,
Yeah.
owned by federal government.
Yeah.
But if you did want to put an effort to try to amend the language to read private for-profit institutions rather than corporations, that would solve some of it.
Well,
That might solve some of it, but is there the will on the part of our legislators to make any of those changes?
Probably not.
No. No.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'd also call your attention, it would very likely not only require an amendment to state law, but appropriate amendments and changes to federal law. Several acts have been enacted by the U.S. Congress that directly address these issues, all of which have had the effect of removing that property from under your taxing jurisdiction.
Mhm.
So it would require, it appears, an amendment both on state law and then the appropriate enactments by the U.S. Congress in order to remedy the situation.
It's just amazing
Well,
to
you
me
say
that we have
legislators,
for-profit
I mean, it's-
corporations making billions of dollars without having to pay their fair share of taxes.
But the only way to get around that would be if there was an agreement to get a payment in lieu of taxes. That would
Which there's no
probably be the
really
only-
incentive for them to do that.
So, we got dealt lemons, we're gonna have to make lemonade.
No, and then we also inquired, we learned from the Riley County
Mhm.
Commission that there is an agreement where there is a per acre compensation to the county
In lieu of taxes.
in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, and I think the
I'm
school
pretty sure ours is
district
the-
gets, does the
is our-
school district get something?
Yeah.
Well,
I
they
think
do,
school
yeah.
district
The school
does.
They
district
get in
gets
lieu of
that.
tax.
Yeah, school district, federal government does pay some money too. I think it goes to the state of Kansas, actually. and
Perfect.
Comes back as part of that.
They intercepted.
The land
70%.
under the management of the BLM
Whatever
or
part
the
they
Forestry
decide to share
Service,
with us.
they pay a pilot for those properties. That's for Leavenworth County, it's like $1,500 a year. We just don't have a lot of
It
federal.
doesn't apply to DOD.
Ground under it doesn't apply to it's basically uninhabited
Yeah.
ground that the federal government owns.
Yeah, if it's a
They'll pay
national
payment
park
in lieu of
or
taxes on
forest.
it.
Right,
But
that's,
ground that's under use as a base or installation, they don't pay.
no.
And they do it, but I'm saying, I think they do it, Riley.
Yeah.
It's occupancy.
Yeah, there's two different pills going on now. There's one to the school, and there's one for federal parks and forests and stuff. But basically, like Mark's saying, if it has people on it, they don't pay, like DODs. Right. So that's what we're working on.
So are you ready to make your announcement on how many dollars of tax exempt property?
$2.5 billion
$2
in valuation of Fort
Leavenworth.
Leavenworth does not pay taxes to support our infrastructure and services locally.
What's our current valuation, Bob, for the
Eight.
county?
$8 billion.
It's incredible to me that a for-profit corporation
So basically 40%, we're operating on a 35%, we're operating on a 65% budget of what we should have for a population of 88,000 people. We're handicapped 35% of our
Yep.
budget.
So we got to get some houses built,
Yeah.
Big ones.
big ones. All right.
Businesses.
Next item, I just added the state of Kansas does a compliance audit on the appraiser's office every year. I just included some results in there so you can kind of see what we're graded on and the things that they check. So the 50% of it is for statistical compliance, meaning they measure our values against sale prices. So we set our value as of January 1. They take all the sales that happen January 1 through December 31 and compare them back to our values. They're doing this just against, they do it against every class of property. They only grade us on residential and commercial property. They also weight that by the percent of value. So residential, out of those, just those two, residential makes up 92.1% of it. So of that 50 points, 92.1% goes to residential, 7.9 goes to commercial, and we received, all the points out of there. And then they have all those, which you see there, we have to submit documentation that we followed the appraisal process, did all the analysis we were supposed to do, applied that analysis, actually valued and did everything we're supposed to do, and met all the statutory. I just put that so you can see that is what they do.
We know you're doing a fantastic job.
What's that?
We know your department is doing a fantastic
Yep.
job. We appreciate it.
That's all I have.
You said they come once a year to do this?
Yeah, it's a year-round process, so, and they finish it up about this time every year. We just got the results just recently.
How does that work? Do they call you up and they say, we're going to be meeting with you about this, or is it like?
Well, we have to submit to them. They do make a visit, 1 or 2 visits, but we essentially have to submit all our documentation
state.
to them, to the state.
And what department is it? Department?
It's Property Valuation Division, which is a division of the Department of Revenue.
So tracking the sales so far this year, we could be looking at another huge appraisal
We'll see.
increase
We'll
next
see.
year.
It doesn't look to have slowed down significantly at this point. The number of sales have, so.
So you have less,
Less sales to go.
yeah,
by.
less sales, but they're all increasing in
That just means you got a
valuation.
smaller sample size, it doesn't change the goal.
Right. Right. So I hope we don't have another 8-point.
Well,
increase.
yeah.
Well, it is what it is. Can't stop people from overpaying for houses.
All right.
So, all right.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. All right. We are ready for Council on Aging.
Morning, Linda.
Morning, Linda.
Good morning.
Like,
Okay, we will start with our transportation, but first, just a little note on our expenditures. We have spent 62% of our budget right now, and on our revenue, our donations that we've taken in, we've reached the 100% point, so we're happy with that. After we left the KDOT program in 2016, we had an increase in our ridership. And then if you look at the graph that I've given you, you see it all looks very, very steady. The reason for that is that we have a specific number of vehicles, a specific number of drivers. But our increase that we're seeing in people is we're having to turn them down for rides. because we cannot do any more than what we're doing right now. And this goes for our other programs too. It's just not transportation, but it is increasing the southern portion of the county. If it continues right now, we will have provided 1,200 rides down there. And that is, here again, causes us to have to turn more people down because of the drive time to get there to pick them up down in Tongi and Linwood. That will be helped come January when we will have a staff person with our new budget that will be stationed down there and can go directly from the Ryford Center to the rural areas to pick up the people. We still operate under a first request, first service, and I know sometimes that's tough because you know, somebody may have a doctor's appointment and somebody may want to go get their hair done. And there is some anger involved with people being turned down. You will hear people say, I can never get a ride. It's tough. We probably will, not in 2020, but in 2021, need to ask ourselves, do we want to increase the full-time drivers that we have and try to increase the provision of service? You know, we're going to be into the 2020. We will have the one person down in the southern part, but every day, 12,000 people reach the age of 60. So you've got people that are advancing in age, and then Leavenworth County's growing, and the southern part of the county's growing. So that's where we're going to probably see that growth in the request for service. And I will just tell you, in the first 6 months, we've driven over 93,000 miles providing transportation service. So the request, the need is definitely there. Our information and assistance, you can also, if you look at the graph, it's taken a big jump. Part of that's due to the outreach that we go through. We are available one day a month in every town in Leavenworth County. So a part of that is due to that. Another part is, it gets very frustrating for seniors that if they need information and they're told to use technology, you know, the calling up and getting that person on the phone to talk to you.
Tell them to Google that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so, you know,
I'm sure that is
it's a big problem. So they need our help in accessing all of that. We have 5 now counselors that come October will be providing the health insurance counseling when open enrollment comes. In the past, we've had 3, and this year we took 2 more to get certified, so we can try to meet that need.
Linda, quick question on the phones. Do you guys keep track of the types of calls that you get?
Yes,
So when
we
you
do.
think about those different queues, you know, oftentimes you try to, believe it or not, I mean, you're trying to solve it through technology, right? Because if you're calling about item 1 or item 5, you would have a prompt, in which case maybe you could get that information. That information would be in, say, a recording versus a live body, if that makes sense.
Ask me that again, I didn't understand.
So if there's a general, so you think about like a website, which we know a lot of them won't use, there's an FAQ, right? Frequently asked questions. So if you're keeping track and you're able to prioritize those questions through the phone system, you might be able to have recordings that would answer those, the top 5 asked questions, for example. Before you, and that's usually within the capability of someone is pressing the number of which they have the question about.
But depending on the age of the individual, you know, I mean, you know, as they
Well, I know, just keep pressing
as they
zero.
get younger and being more used to technology and having to speak to a recording versus a human being, I think that a lot of times the people that are in their 70s right now and their 80s right now and some in their 90s right now that would be calling, they don't want to hear a recording. They want the voice of a human being to interact
Understood.
with them. And sometimes it's just to have that interaction with someone.
I'm
So,
not in that category yet, and I still like it.
well, okay, but I'm just saying, well, I was trying to be nice to.
Oh, okay.
And to Mr. Van Paris.
Commissioner, I can't hear you. Would you use your talking stick up there?
Moving on to our nutrition, that's another program that grows. And there, across the country, there is a real problem, an escalating problem of seniors that are very hungry, that they're subsisting on one meal a day. For our young children, we have breakfast at schools, we'll have the summer food program, we have the backpacks to take home for the weekend, and for our seniors, it's not there. And that's one of the reasons I don't ever want to have to go to a waiting list. I know there are places that have done that. We are struggling dramatically to get the meals there. We have 68 volunteers. That's not enough, but we've got to be very careful about who we put in the position of going into a senior's home. There's some days I've had to take as many as 5 staff members off their job to go deliver meals. Because if a volunteer calls in, maybe they're going to be out of town for a week, or they're sick, or a family member's sick, we have to get that meal there between 10 and 12. And so we have no recourse but to pull staff to do that. And I don't see any other way. We are making concerted effort to try to get more volunteers. But it's tough because some seniors are still working. And then you have younger people that aren't volunteering at the rate that they used to volunteer. So it's tough, but I hope we don't ever have to go to that part that we have to have people where they have to be on a waiting list after they come out of the hospital and they have to wait for a month to get meals. The other part that concerns me is the people that are truly hungry, and we kind of know who they are. We were very fortunate this summer. We had some people generously bring some of their garden produce. And so what we did was we tried to take that to the ones that we really knew were struggling. We would divide it up. Also, we had a staff member that if you couldn't go to the farmer's market, she would go down there and get the produce that you selected, and we did that. But nevertheless, there in Leavenworth County, there are seniors that are hungry. Then our support groups, they're doing quite well. The one that's growing the most is the caregiver support group in Tonganoxie, which was kind of a surprise to us. But they are adding new individuals all the time to that one. This past week, I don't know if any of you knew Joe Oliver. He was on our board. He was a great volunteer in our intergenerational programs. He passed away. So I would like to ask for you to appoint Sharon Marsh to Joe's position on the board.
Okay. You'll need a motion for that, or just a consensus?
Well, typically, we would have like an application on any of our other boards. They fill out that little kind of
Okay.
one-sheet application. We put it on the agenda for you to approve. We can
Okay.
handle it that way. If you'd like, it'd just be on next week's agenda. And
That'll work.
we can fill in the information that we know.
Okay.
So that it'd be approved that way.
Let's do that then. Add that to our agenda.
It'll just be on the consent agenda then next week.
That makes
That's all
sense.
we have.
Out of your 300 meals that you deliver, you said that there's certain ones you know that they're hungry. What would you say? What number would you say?
I couldn't give you a percentage because some of them are very reticent about telling us that they don't have enough. And so we hear it in that, well, this is my only meal, I'm going to divide this up. And I had brought this to the board before, that when we started our PALS program, the pet, that we feed the pet food, and that came from seniors. And sometimes, couldn't feed their pets, they were having them help. But now we have found that we're providing some pet food, and we know at least one instance where they were eating the dog food, so.
But out of 300, would you say
I-
30?
Well, if I had to guess, I would say out of the 330 is probably probably in that range.
So, Lyndon, you already mentioned this. I mean, there's an aging senior demographic. There is a good chance in the not-so-distant future we cannot keep up with the demand. At the same time, as passionate as we would like to be and have as many programs as possible, I can't imagine anybody would prioritize some of these programs over making sure someone's fed. Right? So, like, in my mind, I'm like, to even think somebody could be getting their hair done and at the same time somebody not eat. That's a very difficult, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I can clearly prioritize which one of those is a gotta have and which one would be a nice to have. So when we think about it, I guess my question is, and as you track your ridership, it's, how do we make sure that the demands, the physiological ones, or again, your person that has to get to a doctor's appointment because they have a cancer treatment may not get a ride or has to reschedule because someone wanted something else that I would view as less critical. Doesn't mean that it's not
We track
important.
that. We
Okay.
track the purpose of every ride we give. And what used to be getting your hair done was much more prevalent than it is now. What you're seeing is DaVita going for, that kind of service, and then going to Kansas City to specialist. So, but we do track that. So to use, going to the beautician versus a medical, it's minuscule.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting we try to do all things and be all things for all people. It's also not realistic. So making
Well,
sure that
Mark's
those things.
told me that already.
Sorry.
And that is what I'm saying to you, they're on all of these programs, and with the number of people that are turning 60 and that are going to need this, I don't know what the cutting off point is or how we cut that off, but yes, I understand that.
One is the unfortunate part, it's funding, right? The funding can
Sure,
only go so
sure.
far. And although we can try to increase funding, I think we're going to be severely outpaced.
Well,
So
and
certain
the
things
older
will-
Americans, that's a big thing, the ACT, for the Meals on Wheels program, they're trying to get more federal dollars to be able to filter down for these programs that are on the local
Right.
level.
Well, it's incredible work that y'all do.
It is, but, sometimes there's some strings attached to the federal dollars, just like the KDOT dollars.
Yes.
Sometimes you can't afford to take them. But I guess it's something we can add to our list.
Well, it's down the future, but I just wanted you to be aware of the trend, that this is.
Okay, and then, of course, your organization, I'm sure, accepts cash donations for food and whatnot, and pet food, stuff like that. So we need to get that information out there. And you also adopt seniors at the holidays, correct?
Well, we're going to be out at Dillon's collecting food and toiletry type things beginning of October. People have been great there.
And that's
then
going
we
to be
give
at
that out as
Dillon's?
stockings. at
Dillon's
Christmas.
through October through the end of the year?
No, just one time.
Just one
at
day,
Just
Dillon's.
one
out in
day?
front,
Okay.
Yeah.
collecting, so go there on that day when it's announced and fill
And
their
what day
baskets.
would that be?
I think it's October 3rd, but I don't know that positively.
Okay.
How much
Well,
do
that
you
would be a
typically raise on
Thursday.
your annual fundraiser? How much do you typically raise?
This 13,000 was what we did this last time.
And We just need to encourage more volunteerism if, for people to deliver the meals for the Meals on Wheels over their lunch.
They are very, very generous. Just an example, this week we got this box from California, and somebody's from California sending us something. And you opened it up and it was these cookies from Cravers. It's supposed to be some fabulous thing in San Diego. And it was somebody thanking us for watching her father, because they have nobody here, and providing transportation for him.
Yep,
So
and it's-
they are very generous, even from afar. They are generous. It's the only thing we're lacking is volunteers.
That's why we need volunteers.
And a lot of your seniors are homeowners, correct? Mr. Fields. Now, I know this man just had a birthday recently, didn't you? Or was that, didn't you have a birthday recently?
Next month.
Okay, or you got one coming up, okay.
But the reason I raised my hand, commissioners, is on October 12th, I'll be having approximately 80,000 pounds of potatoes that will be coming to Bonner Springs. We do this every year, and we give them out free. So we do bring about 15,000 pounds of potatoes to the city of Leavenworth, and would love to have you guys connect with us to make sure that we get these potatoes delivered. We're also including beans this year, dried beans, and whatever foods we don't get rid of, we have harvesters there to pick up. So we have 2 locations this year, but would love to hook up with you so that we can ensure that we will be able to get as much help to the Leavenworth County people as possible.
Well, that's great.
What day was that, Vernon?
It's October the 12th.
Awesome.
It's a Saturday.
What are the locations?
We're going to be at Bonner Springs United Methodist Church from, I believe it's 9 to 11, or 11 to 1. I don't have that specific piece. And then we're also going to be at Bristol Hill United Methodist Church in Kansas City, Kansas. And we do this every year. We've been doing this for 15 plus years. We just want to make sure that if we hear that people are hungry, we will be there to do our best. We do deliveries as well. So just.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fields.
Anybody have any questions,
Just,
concerns?
we'll try to, anything you've got coming up, we'll try to promote it really well. I know, like I said, the holiday season and adopt a senior and stuff like that.
Well, I know you've sat in and been a big part of those KTA, meetings, and I'm curious if a program was created there, if that would maybe offset a little bit of that ridership. We already know about all the people that would not take advantage of it, and some of the seniors that wouldn't, but maybe some of the more, social activities might be able to leverage a solution like that, if that makes sense.
We were very surprised when we left the 5311 program and how our ridership increased. And so we were inquiring as to why. There was a little bit of fear.
Right, you shared
They
that.
didn't want the people to know where they lived. A little bit of indignant if there was somebody on there that was loud or children that were loud. And so, I don't know if the seniors have changed that mindset. I would say the older part, not at all.
My thinking is that if you get to a point where you're having to scrutinize more and or prioritize more, and that ultimately that means there's people we can't offer services to, it'd be great to have another option.
Oh, absolutely,
Right?
absolutely.
So in parallel,
Yes.
not in
Yes.
partnership
Yes.
necessarily, but
For sure,
if you have to say no, it'd be great to have a plan B.
that's right. Now, I don't know for the medical transportation, how well that would go, because,
Well,
the
and I think that
plans
needs to
are
be at the
for
top
them
of your
to
list.
change buses when they get to a certain area in Kansas City, Kansas, and I don't think some would have the ability to.
I did have a question just on, I guess it's more procedural, but when you say first come, first serve, like, so is that day of, day before? Like, is there a requirement as
you-
far as how much in advance you can schedule something?
You can call in 2 weeks before, but you at least have to call in the day before. We don't do any same day.
Right.
Unless there's an emergency and we've had a cancellation. And then we'll fit you in if you need to really go to the doctor and somebody's canceled.
So something to just think about. What if you had a 2-week notice time for medical and say 1 week notice time on non-medical? So for example, you know that all of your medical gets scheduled because they're allowed to call in before anybody else can. Just as a, could you create a schedule so that the higher priority requests can call in before others
Sure.
can?
But
Does that make sense?
going to the grocery store is sometimes very important for people as they manage their money. Some go once a month, so it's very important that they get that once a month to get what they're going to buy for the whole month.
Sure.
Because they know I've got X amount of dollars, this is all I can get, and
But if the week before they request, that following Thursday, and that Thursday's unavailable, they can request the next day or that, I mean, generally speaking, I'm guessing they can get in within a few days. I'm just thinking, yes, food matters, and we do provide a service there as well, but someone getting to the doctor's maybe more critical than that particular day you go to the grocery store. It may have to wait a day. And I realize you might shop for the month, but just a thought, ways to prioritize to make sure those in the highest absolute need can get the reservation before
and
maybe
we
someone that's
do
less.
our best to do that
Sure.
now. But like I said, and then of course there's the other element that, and we're all this way, and I'm sure you all hear it and see it. It's kind of sometimes about me. And people can get really angry when they're told no,
Sure.
And
Especially on the phone.
And so sometimes our dispatchers take a lot of things they don't want to hear because we had to tell them no. We had to not be able to take
Can't
them
take
for
it
that.
personal.
No, you can't, and it's what it is. It's in everything.
Yeah. It's like lost luggage at the airline. It's never a good day. No one comes up and says you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Linda.
you, Linda. All right, Mr. Joseph.
In the house.
You're gonna have to get moving here.
Yeah.
Tee off at 12?
One.
Oh,
Left lunch at 11:30.
15. Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning.
I just wanted to highlight some of the special projects we're working on. The first one is the County Road 1 project. We are almost done with the regulations, and also it's going before the Planning Commission on the 25th of September. We have sent more than 300 notices to the public. So after the meeting on the 25th, after like 3 weeks, it'll come to the board for final approval. On the comprehensive plan, it's moving forward. We have in October, the first week is the charrette, so we'll be busy with that. And then we had more than 2,500 surveys with regards to the comprehensive plan. So that was a very good turnout.
You said 2,500?
Yeah, 2,500. We also received a draft of the first 2 chapters of the plan itself, so staff is working on reviewing that at this time. That's a lot of work to review, so we're trying to get like pieces of that, so it's easier for us to do that.
Jeff, I would assume for what we're paying the consultant, they should be packaging a lot of this for you and your staff.
Correct.
Is there that amount of heavy lifting on your team?
Yeah, but they're still not that much aware of the community, so we have to, do a lot of review still, just to make sure that all the information is correct. Since we work on the day-to-day business, so. So from the survey results, the consultant is currently working on analyzing them, so they're pretty busy with that as well. The Planning and Zoning Department, we're trying to fill the vacant positions that are available, so we're pretty busy juggling a lot of things. On the GIS side, we still have a position open we're trying to fill, but we are working with all the agencies, trying to make sure everything gets done, so everything is fine this time. So unless you have any questions for me?
You have down, created a building permit application applicable for commercial developments, churches, and schools. Is that big changes?
No changes, it's just to streamline the process. It'll make it
Okay.
easier for the applicants to apply and such.
One of the reasons we have all the special use permits that we do is we don't have a formalized commercial or industrial or other application process that allows us to go through the process without the SUP. If we had, like when you come in for a building permit for your house, there's a process. Doesn't require a special use permit. If you want to build a commercial in a commercially zoned area, it should be a similar process.
It
And
should
that's-
be.
And that's what we're trying to get to, and that's what Jeff's staff's working on. That's what he's referring to.
Good. That'd save a lot of problems.
Yeah, we're also working with Olson to create a lot of policies that are streamlined, so it's easier for us to make a decision. So they're pretty good at helping us do that this time.
Jeff, one question I had regarding the comprehensive plan and for Olson, maybe more so than you, was, one of the last meetings, they had just finished up meeting with a lot of the city stakeholders, right? I thought we had talked about either a work session or a meeting that would also include some of the development arms and/or individuals. So for example, if you took the top 3 to 5 home builders in Leavenworth County, if you took the top 2 or 3, I realize there's not a lot of it, commercial development, having, maybe it's just me, and if I'm on an island by myself, feel free to correct me, everybody, but there's a tremendous amount of experience and just expertise to leverage from that group as far as thinking about how we grow as a community.
Yes.
Probably a lot more so in just a few individuals than maybe 40 or 50 individuals, retired or otherwise, that maybe have never built anything that can attend a meeting. Like, not that you need to hear from everyone, don't get me wrong, but if you're going to have a technical committee, and if we're going to have, the city stakeholders, it would seem like one specific to the developers would be a good idea.
Yeah, they're actually part of the technical group. We included every, developers that actually develop within Leavenworth County, even within cities. So they are part of the group.
So they're mixed in with the cities then?
Correct.
Has that roster been communicated? I guess I probably missed it as far as who makes up that committee.
It's on the list. I can provide
It's on
you
the
with the
list,
list,
okay.
yes.
How's the building code committee coming along? What's the status of that? Do we have that all appointed? Have they met?
No, sir, we haven't done that yet. It's in the process right now.
That's the same with the utility one?
Yes. The utility one, it's part of the comprehensive plan process, so once we establish that group, then that'll be the committee afterwards.
When do you anticipate this building code committee doing its work?
As soon as possible.
Have any dates in mind?
The main project at this time is the County Road 1. That's taking a lot of time. So once that's completed, then we'll move on to that.
Probably after the first of the year?
Before the first of the year, probably December. Yeah, December is what I'm.
And then Jeff, I had one, this was from the meeting that I had to miss last Wednesday. I dialed in, but it sounds like both hearing me and me hearing those here could have went much better.
It wasn't good.
Wasn't good. What I was trying to inquire about is we've had a number of discussions on, 5-acre tracts, R5 going to potentially R2.5. And I guess the question I have is, it seems like I've heard both at the county level and within the city, that an engineered septic solution is approved on even a 1 acre parcel of ground. So as we look at, again, trying to push and promote more and more building, more and more development, ideally, we want to try to push that and keep it closer to the cities where that infrastructure is there. But when you have developers and you have people that want to buy these lots that are further outside of the city, what our greatest, concern is. So I guess my question just is maybe a follow-up, not to answer now, in working with planning and zoning, and I will be at the next meeting, but, help me to understand why we would maybe discourage, if you had a 50-acre parcel that's zoned R5, we can have 10 homes versus, 20 homes versus in a scenario where maybe they're, even slightly smaller, in that if there's an engineered, EPA-approved, or health department-approved.
KDHE.
KDHE, thank you. So many acronyms, it's incredible.
Yep.
Why we would be against or object to bringing more people, building more homes, realizing that it's been the feeling that nobody necessarily loves the R5 and or 2.5 anyway. And if it's not an apartment or high density, we're, sometimes hesitant to it. But I'm like, it seems like it's going to be easier to bring infrastructure, sewer, utilities, and otherwise, when there ultimately is growth, to more homes rather than less homes. Does that make sense?
Correct. I can explain the reason for the 2.5 acre minimum for the septic system. It's to locate, you need some space for the actual tank and also the lateral fields. Sometimes the topography doesn't allow that to happen, so you need at least like 2.5 acres to locate the actual system on the property. So if you compress that to 1 acre, it's very difficult to place everything onto that 1 acre lot. So that's why an engineered system is required, where the engineer has to design it in a way that it accommodates everything. And it's very hard. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the engineer will sign off on it, and when something happens, we don't really know where the engineer is. He's gone. So we had a lot of problems with 1 acre lots with septic systems. The reason we allow that is because back in the day, the county allowed 1 acre lots within the county. At that time, there were a lot of lots being split up into 1 acres, so people built houses on them. So at that time, the septic system started failing, so we required engineered systems on those. That's the reason why we have those. We have that option available. And then the only other development that has it is Bear Lakes. They're a PUD, so they are responsible for everything that's happening within that development. The county doesn't go and inspect anything. It's their deal. So if something fails, they have to fix it. It's a state requirement. So that's the reason why we.
But ultimately, and Bear Lakes was brought up several times, so we'll pick on it because of last week. But when we talk about a certain set of standards, so if we were going to say maintain a road, there are obvious requirements and widths and things that we need to be required. There's, in most rural areas, we're not providing that much of a service anyway. When you think about, some of these dust abatement roads or gravel roads or anything else. So I wanted to use the Bear Lake example to say, however many homes are there, and you think about the property value and taxes created, why would I realize why we went down the PUD. It's a path of least resistance. It's put more onus and accountability on the property owner, but it's also math. What is it going to take for us to maintain, if built to a minimum set of standards, a road to service these homes that is equitable for the county? If it's coming at a cost, that's very different. But I can't imagine what it would take to even maintain a, Bear Lake type road versus the property taxes that particular neighborhood creates, that there's an imbalance. But maybe I'm nuts.
No, and you kind of got cut off when we was talking about the local service part, not even covered, but they also paid the road and bridge tax also.
Sure, no, I understand.
And just the city people do not pay the local service. It's just the rural. It
would seem logical to me to create, a couple paths where one is, here is the minimum set of requirements, and by you building, by having this many lots with these types of homes, we can, with Bob's help, probably come to a pretty good valuation point on what the economic upside is for the county, and then what our cost would be to either, again, maintain going forward. And if somebody wants to develop outside of that minimum set of standards or requirements, then you have to go down the PUD.
Yeah, the recent Bear Lakes have been able to sustain themselves is because they're like a wealthy neighborhood, they can sustain themselves.
Well,
But
could
a lot of
also have a
times-
lot of debt, let's just not assume they're all rich.
A lot of times, we get subdivisions they're trying to get away from something else, like trying to get away from the regulations itself. So it's kind of hard to control that. I mean, so if you allow them to build substandard housing and substandard roads, at some point, it's going to come back to the county. I mean, they will come back and say, hey, we cannot maintain this, you have to take control of it. That's what's been happening, ever since we allowed private roads. Yeah.
But have we taken any of them?
I think we've taken like a couple of them, but we've received a lot of requests, I know Mr. Van Paris is aware of a lot of similar situations.
Ones that started out as private and then we have taken them over.
I can give you an example of which one we
I know
took it
there's been a
over.
lot of requests,
Yeah,
but
we
I can't
received a
think
lot
of
of requests, and the road just falls apart, and there is, it's hard for the emergency services to get there, so they all blame the county for.
We get blamed for everything, even if your dog gets run over.
Mark, what did you say in the requirements of the, what was it called? The no use zone on it, or what was it?
No build zone.
No build zone, I couldn't think of the name of it. So when you draft up this proposal on the private roads, we definitely want to keep that in it. But I think what we talked about was that, in specific limited cases, i.e. a Bear Lake type development, that these private roads could be an option for a developer.
After our meeting last week, the joint meeting, I did ask Jeff to prepare some information and to plan on another work session with the Board of County Commissioners to address what came up in that meeting. Things like the no-build zone, the potential benefit district versus an HOA. Because I thought what was clear in that meeting is that a majority of the Planning and Zoning Commission did not support private roads, while a majority of the Board of County Commissioners did support private roads. So I think that the conversation needs to continue on our end to see at what level you support it, what would be the requirements, to see if you can get those back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to see if there were adequate requirements placed on them. I think the challenge with private roads is putting any kind of a minimum design standards on it, because then it's no longer a private road. We've put the standards on it. They design it and build it to our standards. If there's a problem later, who's responsible?
Well, but just to be clear, my recommendation, again, I'm sure that between Jeff, his staff, and Planning and Zoning, they can come up with something way better than what I'm proposing. I'm saying if it's built to a minimum set of standards, then we would be okay with maintaining it. And as a part of the criteria, again, I want to make sure that it's equitable. What size are the lots? What size are the homes? Again, you're trying to make sure that any value that is created off of this development can at least cover the expense associated with maintaining a road going forward. And if you want to deviate from that minimum standard, then it's going to be a PUD like it's been in the past, where it falls apart or not, that's going to be on the developer, the HOA, the people that live there, whatever it is. I mean, it seems like it should be either a certain number of parcels, a certain number of homes, a certain size and or value. There's got to be a base level that would say this is the type of development that the county can economically support because of what it brings from a tax roll perspective. Does that?
No, that's easy enough.
Well, I think it's such a limited amount. I think people get confused on how much taxes are actually generated off of these properties, because if you're outside the city limits and you're not on a county route, you're on just a local service road or whatever, The local service road tax is what's supposed to support the maintenance of that road going forward. I am working on that calculation right now with Olson and Associates on what actual maintenance costs on those roads, and then we'll be able to put apply what you're talking about to that. At 7 or 8 mills, regardless of the value of your home, I really think you're going to struggle to pull enough money off of that house to maintain just the road in front of that house. Not to mention all the roads they drive on to get to that house. And that's where it becomes challenging is, okay, we have a really nice subdivision and they put some really nice homes in there and we collect a decent amount of property tax on it, and we can maintain the roads inside there. Well, we also have to maintain the roads to get to there. Everybody who lives in Leavenworth pays a tax to the county, and we use that tax to provide services out in the county, not in the cities. Those services include the road you have to drive to get to Leavenworth or get out of Leavenworth. It's not an island, you don't fly in and out. Same thing happens with these subdivisions. The more traffic we put on those side roads, I think as we've seen in the south end of the county, the quicker they deteriorate and the faster we have to make improvements. So yes, there's a mathematical calculation and it's out there, but applying it to the roads coming in and the other services becomes a little more of a challenge.
But so just to be clear.
And I'm not discouraging the private development. What I'm saying is the roads within that development, if you're not going to build next to the city, then allow the development, which is what it seems the board has said, but have them provide the maintenance and maintain their own infrastructure within that subdivision up until the time that they become contiguous with other development. That's what I thought was the direction of the board.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to have a Bear Lake type development be created somewhere where it's currently gravel roads, right? It's going to be hard surface likely to that particular tract of ground, whether it's 40 acres or 80 acres or whatever it is. So all that in my mind is we're going to have to maintain that road whether you put 10 more households or 20 more households on it, period. What I'm talking about is the new road that would incorporate those 10 or 20 homes. Right now, we've got a parcel of ground that at 50 acres, let's say, is generating $1,500 or $2,000 a year in property taxes, but it's ag, most likely. Now, we're looking at values of maybe $4,000 per house, and you're talking about 10 houses at 40 grand or 20 houses at 80 grand. What is the cost us to maintain that half a mile or whatever it ends up being, that entry off of the existing hard surface? Is my question. And again, you either do it to a minimum set of standards so that we can maintain it like we do the other roads, or if you deviate from it, that goes back down the road that has been there before. You can be a PUD and.
Well, and I actually think that's currently what our development guidelines are. If you build the road to our standards, follow zoning guidelines, we do take ownership of it. We have subdivisions in the county right now that's there.
That is
there.
I think the question or argument has been, is that minimum set of standards the right set of standards for what we're talking about?
Yeah, and to speak to both, what both of you are saying, you're both saying the same thing. If a typical 5-acre tract is 660 feet of frontage, so if you have 660 feet of road, one house on either side is paying so much in taxes to maintain that road. You change the rules, you get 330 feet of frontage per house, then you got 4 houses paying for the exact same footage of road. So what I think we're saying is we don't want to be a nickel holding up a dollar with where we're going from here.
But if you do a PUD, we can get it down more than that on the frontage.
8 houses. So
The
same
330
footage
by
of road.
660 would be 5 acres.
Right. So
Cut
it's-
that all in half.
Yeah, so it's what both Mark and Chad are both saying, but we just, I think we need to make sure we're on the same page as the planning board.
Right.
But I want to have the economics and data to support it rather than just.
Yeah.
I think
because it's not a gut feeling type thing, it's just the
How far out do you want to go on
numbers.
the economics? Do you want to try to figure out how much money these people spend in the local
Well, yeah,
economy?
I'm just saying at the lowest level here. We
Okay,
focus
just on the property tax. We're not talking about that they spend their money locally.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to say, here's the lowest common denominator.
Okay, but then you
You're right. There's a
figure out
lot.
population. Say, well, at this amount of population, say, let's just use
$2,000 per head or whatever.
Okay. Baser's adding a gas station right now, so that's obviously going to generate more sales tax, and there's a reason why they're put them there because the population will support it. And I think as the population grows, I mean, it's a bigger picture than just the taxes.
Absolutely.
The property taxes, I should say.
So do you anticipate having a proposal on the private roads written up, and then you'll give it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then they'll look at it, and then then they'll send it up to us, or how do you
think,
anticipate that all working?
That's the way
I
it
think
works.
first I'll come before you with the proposal, so we can have a work session on it, and then after that, we'll go to the planning commission.
We done?
Any other questions, Mr. Joseph?
Thank you for all your hard work. I know, I've realized over the past months what a thankless job you have.
Well-
And I just really want to express my appreciation to everything that your office does, because I now fully, well, and I don't know if I fully understand, but I now have a lot different vision of what you're up against, and we appreciate it.
You haven't been to the charrette yet. So that's-
No, I haven't.
But that is true. This year has been very difficult for planning and zoning because of the comprehensive plan and everything. that's
Among
gone along
everything
with it.
else, right?
And also everything else. So, hang in there.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else before us? Then, tomorrow, Commissioner Stevens, you're gonna start
Yeah.
out at Tonganoxie.
Yeah, 9 o'clock, everybody's invited, free breakfast, just gotta let the LCDC, let them know that you're coming. And, that's at 9 o'clock, he'll be, giving a little, he's gonna tour the industrial parks.
Mm-hmm.
And then give a brief presentation, and then, Mayor of Tongi, Jason Ward, is gonna be there, and he'll say a few words, and, then I don't have the rest of the day memorized, I think he goes to Baser next.
Yep.
Do you have a time, Mr. Fields?
I thought she said 10, but I'll be going to the city hall after this. I can get that
Okay.
information.
Well, if you'll take Tongi, I'll take Baser, and then I'll do,
And then we're gonna
Lance
be-
together
I'll
at
be in
the
Lansing.
meeting.
Yeah, the meeting, yeah, that's where the
And that's at noon.
LCC meeting is.
Yep.
11:30.
11:30.
11:30.
And
Okay.
they're doing the correctional facility after that.
Then they're going to tour the correctional facility, and then Fort Leavenworth.
What
on
about the
that.
Leavenworth Industrial Park?
They're going to be seeing that too,
Okay.
but they're going to be, then at Fort Leavenworth, I think is their last stop.
Okay,
Call.
all right. We're in Baser at City Hall?
I think it is city hall, sir. Yeah. They hadn't mentioned to me any other place, so
Okay.
the assumption is city hall.
Okay. All right, I'll make that one. And let's see, anything else?
Linwood City Council, I went last night,
Mhm.
and I invited, a couple of those members are coming to the breakfast. I don't know if they'll follow him all the way up or not, but they're Karen Kane and
Mhm.
Joe Bowles.
Mhm.
Bowles, he's coming.
Okay, and then you also, well, Linwood's a player. Got the state highway runs through there, they're just close to the Turnpike interchange.
Yeah, they got a railroad right up there.
Yeah, but no access to it. You can cross it, can't get on it.
Right. Maybe someday.
Okay, and then you're gonna go play golf here at noon?
I'm going to attempt for the
Going to
LCDC
attempt to play?
fundraiser, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you'll
Good
do
luck.
fine.
I did.
Watch him come back with one of the big trophies.
Yeah.
I did the city commission last night, and then a little promo. Camp Leavenworth is this weekend, beginning Friday.
What's that?
Camp Leavenworth. It's the festival, the new
The new Buffalo Bills
Uh,
Day.
festival
Oh, yeah,
for the
yeah,
city
yeah,
of
okay.
Leavenworth.
It's not gonna get flooded out, correct?
We're not, no, it is not going to be flooded out, but
Okay.
it runs Friday afternoon at 5 PM till 10, and then Saturday from 10 AM till 10 PM. Fireworks both nights. There's going to be different activities. They're going to have a zip line, axe throwing, a s'more station. So I think it sounds like that the group has planned a really fun activity thing for the,
We don't want the county commissioners to be associated with the axe throwing.
oh, okay.
Axe crashing.
Hopefully the weather will cooperate. Looks like there
Yeah,
could be a
hopefully,
chance of rain.
but, yeah, I think it's like 50/50, but we'll see, but I'll be greeting
Okay.
people on Saturday morning, so
Okay.
Very cool.
please think about coming, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's something new and different for, and there's a thing that they're going to be doing, and I can't figure this one out. It's the, what do they call it, the staying alive type music, with headphones on.
Silent DJ.
Silent, yeah. Which I think,
Well, it should
I
be
guess it's
silent.
kind of similar to watching somebody driving down the road talking on their overhead phone, and you think, oh, they talking to themselves? No, they're talking to somebody else. But that's going to be interesting, too, and there are going to be live bands and entertainment
Okay.
throughout the entire festival, so, and vendors and food vendors, so.
Well, Commissioner, if there's going to be disco, it's best that it
That
is
is
silent.
silent.
That's why I said, I just thought that, I just can't fathom exactly how that's going to work, but you put on headphones.
Well, you can
and-
report back to us
Yeah, I'll
next
report
week
back.
on that.
No, you guys need to come and you
I
can
will
find out for
be there.
yourselves.
Music
I'll be
style.
there.
That'll be fun. University of St. Mary reported last night that their enrollment is up, so that's a good thing. So
Yeah.
they're thriving and doing really well. And that was Sister Diane's report, and
Okay.
so that's, and then tomorrow I'll be meeting with Keith Rickard and Mike Griswold to kind of go over some of the expectations and requests from the commission last week from the Mental Health Task Force report, and then we will schedule a formal meeting of the task force and the subcommittees that'll be formed out of that.
Was there a, switching gears just slightly, the birthings, the doctor that came and spoke with us
We
about?
haven't gotten anything moving forward but on that, but it's still on the radar
Okay.
to get something going on
Because
that.
the idea was to create a committee, right? That
Right.
could start to, okay.
And I think that Commissioner Stephen was interested in participating in that. And then, as I said, Friday is the graduation of the group that I'll be attending for the Connection to Success. And so I think that's exciting, that we've got individuals that are prepared to enter the workforce, so.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there was somebody on our board here that was communicating with the doctor and making sure that
Yes,
we're pushing.
I am continuing to communicate.
But you've got, I mean, a lot on your plate.
Well, that's
so
why,
if you-
I'll kind of, once we get things done, I'll shuffle it on off over to the commissioner on the end there if he wants it,
Okay.
but.
Sounds good.
I think it's really important.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
so
it
do
can
I.
be-
As a woman, I really think it's important.
No, but it came up from a few people at the town hall.
Yeah, it's going to, it will be continued. It's just kind of trying to get some of the other things so that we can set priorities and get things moving in a way that gets it going.
Thank you.
Yep.
Got anything to report?
Met with some more people on our 152 bridge idea, Fort Leavenworth, Heidi Malarchik, and Mid-America Regional Council. Ron's going to be here this afternoon,
Yes.
so we can talk some more about that. Trying to get the 152 bridge project on the radar for the new list of future projects. And speaking of bridges, I was going to ask Mark about maybe an update on the Millwood Bridge. I think what we figured out is in the scope of what we asked for, they are going to build the bridge higher. One of the big concerns was to make sure Millwood is passable when Easton's flooded and Atchison, or Potter's flooded. It's always been the alternate route, but it still floods at about 2 feet higher than Easton does. So we thought, while we're rebuilding this bridge, we want to do it right. Since it's closed anyway, let's build it back a little bit higher so that it's even passable at higher flood stage. So in the original scope, I think I was talking to Mark about what we asked for. And I was under the impression we asked for sort of two projects. One is to build the bridge back higher, and two was to build the approach back higher. So I think that's what I was going to ask Mark about it. What we figured out that they said was the bridge is being proposed 2.5 feet higher than it is now, but the approach would probably have to be about a $3 million separate project to build it back higher.
I think the challenge is the bridge does not flood as quickly as the roadway floods. It's the road
You're right.
that's the issue.
Yeah.
And the bridge is the project right now.
Right.
The project right now is to reopen the bridge so the road is passable regardless of whether there's water or not.
Yeah.
What we had them look at is in the design to make sure that that bridge was designed for, like you're saying, the flood events, and that it would, if we raised the road with a separate project, that the bridge would be compatible with that. They're doing that. They gave some very preliminary numbers on what the road portion of that project would cost, and they estimated it somewhere around $3.5 million for that road to be built to handle the 100-year flood.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I just want to make sure if we build the bridge back, it's high enough to accept a higher approach.
The bridge is, that was part of our scope.
Yeah,
I've worked with them.
Would it be possible, and I don't know if we do it on a monthly basis or what the right intervals would be, but it seems like, there's always at least a few projects that have a tremendous number of residents interested, and just making it a part of either big capital improvements or just big, replacement projects or whatever it is, making it, the first Wednesday of the month, and it doesn't have to be a dissertation. I mean, it can be a 5 minutes from the stakeholder of that particular department. A lot of this does fall on Public Works, I realize. But I think that would be helpful for one, to keep not only this board, but obviously those that are interested that attend or watch.
And the public apprised of what's going on.
Yep. Sure. Because I think most people are going, this bridge failed. I don't even know the date. It seems like a decade ago. But
That hasn't even been a year.
Probably the first hole would have been about a year ago, that they had to close it over the weekend.
Yeah,
Does that sound about right?
Go back and look at my
it's
text
been-
messages.
yeah.
and tell you
About
the
9 months
exact
ago.
date. I think it
It
was.
had to be
It had to be closed on
later.
Saturday.
Whether it's
Well, then we passed it and got it open again.
Yeah.
So
But when it
about a year-
actually closed 9 months
Right,
ago.
but it was about a year ago is when
First
they had
hole.
to close it on the weekend. They was able to put a plate over it until we got it
Yeah.
inspected or
Yeah.
something.
So for me, it's incredibly hard to swallow, and I don't drive that bridge. But it's like here we are 9 months later, we're still working on scope, design. It's
Those
hard to
things
believe
take
we're
time.
not doing construction in
That's just how
9
long it
months.
takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realize.
Well, what's hard for the
Permits in the
public,
floodplain.
what's hard for the public to understand is it takes about 2 years to replace
Right.
a bridge, but they usually only see the last 4 months of actual
And we've talked about
closure.
that, a lot of planning
The
going
leg-
into
Yeah, I'm
It's
just
laid
saying
up
so
too,
the public
sure.
hears.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you buy the materials and plan it out and get everything ready, and before you actually close traffic for like 4 months. This one
But-
broke on us, so we had to
Right.
stop traffic
But-
at the very beginning of the 2-year process.
On your original statement about building the road up, that's gonna take quite a bit of legwork
We'll
to
have
get
to talk
through the
about that.
floodplain
FEMA.
permits and the
Yeah.
changing of the floodplain
That's
by
the
building the
problem.
road up.
Do
That's
some
why-
talking about that at a later time.
That's
We
probably-
can't
That's
solve
what I
that
said, I mean,
today.
if you started on that today, you're talking.
We can't solve that. I mean,
Several
we can't-
years.
Yeah.
Because it does impact when you change,
Yeah,
there.
especially because it's a FEMA
They're pretty
floodplain.
difficult to deal with
Yeah.
Yeah,
when it comes to floodplain stuff.
yep, that's the problem.
So
I
a
just
lot of
wanted
that
to-
information is in the weekly report through either Public Works or through Olson and Associates or one of the vendors. Over 2 years ago, I actually challenged Public Works to come up with at least a weekly update that would be on the webpage, that
Let's do that.
that would have all that information on there, like a one-page project management sheet for every project that was going on. So if you lived in that area, you could just go pull it up and you could kind of see where it was and what the timeline was. Olson and Associates is in the process of creating those one-page project management sheets for all the projects, because it did not get done previously. So once those are complete and available, they'll be updated probably more often than weekly, actually, but I'm asking that they be posted to our website weekly once they're done, so that all that exactly what you're asking for is a click away.
And then also share it on the social media pages, just so that it's
People can find
put out there as well.
I was in a meeting recently, and it was, I thought it was shared that maybe this larger Kansas City Buck O'Neill Bridge, one, it's taken a lot of funding, obviously, from other projects and around the area. But two, I thought it was, literally all of them. It was an 18-month timeline or less. And that is, there's no comparison in size of projects here. So I just frame a
But
reference.
it started
for
being
people.
planned before that.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Well, I've been
Oh,
going
yes,
to
it
meetings.
was. I know that for a fact.
You can have a project on a list or even a 2050. That doesn't mean all the design work is complete.
But you have the preliminary design. There was nothing, absolutely nothing that had been done when they closed down the Millwood Bridge. So
That's
there
the
was no
problem.
preliminary, there was no getting this things, get ready to be put out for the solicitation of the engineering design, then the solicitation that goes after that for the building. I mean, none of that had taken place for this. That had.
Yeah, they had. There was an inspection done on it. It
Okay.
was 67%, I think.
But I was just saying, but for design and build,
Said
I
we
mean, it
had
was,
8
all of
more
that
years.
was.
Right.
So there's things that always happen in those jobs that are planning, that nobody is aware of.
Well, the bridges we're going to replace, let's say next year, not the one we're talking about, started design 2 years ago. And they'll start, if we need property acquisition, it'll start a year before the project's actually even
Right.
scheduled to be done. All the material will be on the ground before we start doing any of the work. I guess that's what you're talking about on that. I don't know about the Buck O'Neill Bridge when they started planning for it and when the design started on it. A bridge that size, I can't imagine they just slapped together a prefab. So it's got to be a lot of design work. And there's nothing that money won't fix.
And budgeting,
Yeah.
and budgeting
For,
as well, but
we could have a new
budgeting
bridge, we could have a new bridge up there right now, we'd already be driving on it if we threw an appropriate amount of money towards it.
It's got to be done economically, I understand.
Okay. Some of these questions can be asked this afternoon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, sure.
You can call in and while
I
you're
call
riding on the
in.
golf
I call in,
cart.
don't worry.
While you're buzzing around on the golf cart.
Your string and 2 cups didn't work.
Yeah.
Anyways, anything else?
We could be closer
Then
in.
We'll adjourn.